Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books in Bytes. Today, we're jacking into the metaverse with Neal Stephenson's Snow Crash.
Oh, yeah.
You sent this one in, so you already know. It's a cyberpunk classic that throws pizza delivery, samurai sword fights, and ancient Sumerian mythology all into a blender.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And hits frappe. But what are the big ideas
Big ideas.
lurking beneath this neon-drenched future?
Well, at its core, Snow Crash is about the power of information.
Okay.
Stevenson paints a picture of a future where technology has blurred the lines between the real and the virtual,
Right.
and corporations wield information like a weapon.
Okay, so before we get lost in the digital jungle,
Right.
let's set the stage for anyone who hasn't read the book.
Okay.
What's the basic plot and who are the key players?
The story follows Hiro Protagonist,
Yeah.
a hacker and pizza delivery driver extraordinaire.
Okay.
In the real world, he's struggling to make ends meet, delivering pizzas for the mafia-esque Cosa Nostra pizza.
Cosa Nostra Pizza.
But in the metaverse, a sprawling virtual reality world,
Yeah.
he's a legendary sword fighter and prince of the digital realm.
Ah, so we've got this clash between Hiro's dual lives, the gritty reality of late-stage capitalism, and the escapism of the metaverse. That seems like a pretty relevant theme these days.
Oh, absolutely. And that contrast is further emphasized by the book's setting.
Yeah.
While the metaverse is all high-tech glitz and virtual glamour, the real world is crumbling.
Right.
The government has essentially ceded control to corporations, and society is fractured along economic lines.
It's like the book is holding up a mirror to our own anxieties about technology, wealth inequality, and the growing power of corporations.
Precisely, and into this chaotic world comes the Snow Crash virus, a linguistic weapon that can infect both hackers in the metaverse and people in reality.
Wait, a linguistic weapon?
Yeah,
How does that even work?
Now, that's where Stevenson gets really mind-bendy.
Okay.
He draws parallels between the Snow Crash virus and ancient Sumerian mythology, specifically the myth surrounding the goddess Shera and the god Enki.
Well, hold on. Sumerian mythology. We're going way back here.
Right, but that's part of what makes Snow Crash so fascinating. It connects ancient myths about the power of language to our modern anxieties about information overload and the potential for technology to control us.
Okay, so we've got Hiro, the hacker/pizza guy,
Yeah.
navigating this dystopian future where corporations rule the metaverse, offers a seductive escape, and a mysterious virus threatens to unravel the fabric of reality. Where do we go from here?
So Hiro's world gets turned upside down when he crosses paths with YT.
YT.
A fearless teenage courier who becomes entangled in his adventures.
Okay.
She's kind of like the cyberpunk version of a skateboard punk,
Right.
but with mad tech skills and a razor-sharp wit.
YT sounds like my kind of character. She's not just a sidekick, is she?
Definitely not YT's journey is as important as Hiro's.
Okay.
She sheds light on the darker underbelly of this future world, particularly the plight of those who are struggling to survive on the fringes of society.
So she's representing the human cost of this unchecked technological advancement and corporate greed, right?
Exactly, and her story intersects with Hiro's in a really unexpected way when they both get caught up in the mystery of the Snow Crash virus.
Okay, so we've got these two parallel narratives. Hiro's deep dive into the virtual world and YT's struggle for survival in the real world. How do they converge?
Well, remember how we talked about the Snow Crash virus being linked to Sumerian mythology?
Yeah.
It turns out that Elbab Reif,
Yeah.
a ruthless media mogul who controls vast swaths of the metaverse, is using the virus for his own nefarious purposes.
So Rife is like the puppet master pulling the strings of this chaotic future, and the Snow Crash virus is his ultimate weapon.
Precisely, he believes that by controlling information, he can control humanity itself.
Right.
He wants to reshape the world in his own image using the Snow Crash virus to rewrite the very code of human consciousness.
It's like he's trying to hack the human operating system. That's terrifying.
It is, and that's what makes Snow Crash such a compelling read. It forces us to consider the implications of our increasing reliance on technology and the potential for information to be used for control rather than liberation.
Okay, so we've laid out the major players, and the stakes are pretty high. A rogue media mogul, a mind-altering virus, and two unlikely heroes caught in the crossfire.
Right.
But what about Hiro's pizza delivery gig? How does that factor into all of this?
The deliberator, that's not just a quirky detail.
Okay.
It's actually a key part of the book's social commentary.
Really? How so? It just seems like a fun, if slightly dangerous way to pay the bills.
It's more than that. Remember that, quote, the deliverator belongs to an elite group of men and women who do a job that nobody else wants to do in a world that treats them like dirt.
Right.
It highlights the dehumanizing aspects of the gig economy,
Yeah.
the way it isolates workers and strips them of their sense of agency.
So even in this futuristic world, we see echoes of our current anxieties about job security automation and the erosion of worker rights.
Exactly. Hiro's deliberator job is a stark reminder that technology can create new forms of inequality and exploitation.
Okay, so we've got this fascinating mix of ancient mythology, cyberpunk action, social commentary, all woven together in this fast-paced narrative. Where do we go from here? What's next for Hiro and YT?
Well, as Hiro delves deeper into the mystery of the snow crash virus and Rife's plan, he realizes that he can't fight this battle alone.
Right.
He needs help, and that's where YT's unique skills and knowledge of the real world come into play.
So it becomes a team effort, with Hiro and YT combining their strengths to take on Rife and his army of virtual and real-world goons.
Yes, but they're going to face some serious obstacles along the way.
Right.
Rife is a powerful adversary, and the snow crash virus is a formidable weapon.
Yeah.
The fate of the world quite literally hangs in the balance.
All right, so we've got high stakes, a looming threat, and two unlikely heroes joining forces to save the day. This is where things start to get really interesting. But before we dive into the heart of the action, let's take a closer look at the world Stephenson has created. This strange and seductive blend of virtual reality and dystopian reality. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive into Snow Crash.
That's good.
See you then.
All right. So, one of the things that that struck me about Snow Crash is how vividly Stevenson portrays the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a digital playground.
Right?
It's a world with its own rules, its own economy, its own social hierarchy.
Right. It's almost like a separate reality.
Yeah.
One that's both alluring and unsettling, kind of makes you wonder where our own obsession with virtual worlds is headed.
Exactly. And Stevenson doesn't shy away from exploring the darker aspects of the metaverse.
Right.
He shows how it can be used to exploit people,
Yeah.
to manipulate their desires, to control their perceptions of reality.
Like with Elbob Rife and his plan to use the Snow Crash virus to basically brainwash the entire population.
Precisely. Rife understands that in the digital age, information is power.
Right.
And he's willing to use any means necessary to seize that power and reshape the world according to his own twisted vision.
It's like he's taken the idea of fake news to a whole new level. He's not just manipulating information, he's weaponizing it.
Right, and the snow crash virus is the ultimate expression of that weaponization.
Yeah.
It's a virus that attacks the very foundation of human consciousness, blurring the lines between language, code, and biology.
It's a pretty terrifying concept, especially when you consider how vulnerable we are to information overload and manipulation in our own world.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that makes Snow Crash so relevant today. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that technology can be just as easily used for control and oppression as it can for liberation and progress.
So how does the metaverse actually work in the book? I mean, it's obviously a virtual reality world, but what are the mechanics of it? How do people access it? What can they do inside it?
Stevenson goes into quite a bit of detail about the technical infrastructure of the metaverse.
Okay.
People access it through a combination of virtual reality headsets, haptic suits, and high bandwidth connections.
Okay, so it's like a super immersive version of the internet where you can actually feel and interact with the virtual environment.
Exactly. And within the metaverse, there's a whole hierarchy of spaces ranging from public areas like the street,
Okay.
which is this endless virtual boulevard filled with shops, clubs, and entertainment venues, to private estates owned by corporations and wealthy individuals.
And the street is where all the action happens, right? It's where Hiro hangs out, where he encounters YT, where he faces off against Rife's goons.
Right. The street is kind of like the Wild West of the metaverse. It's a place where anything goes, where the rules are constantly being rewritten, where fortunes can be made and lost in the blink of an eye.
It sounds both exhilarating and dangerous. Like you said, it's got this Wild West vibe to it, but with a cyberpunk twist.
Exactly, and that's part of what makes it so appealing to characters like Hiro.
Yeah.
He's drawn to the freedom and the anonymity of the metaverse.
Right.
The opportunity to reinvent himself and escape the constraints of the real world.
But it's not all fun and games in the metaverse, is it? I mean, there's the Snow Crash virus, for one thing, and then there's the whole issue of corporate control and exploitation.
Right. The metaverse might offer a sense of escape, but it's still ultimately a reflection of the power dynamics of the real world called. Corporations control the infrastructure, they set the rules, and they profit from the activities of the users.
It's like the metaverse is a microcosm of our own society, where the lines between the virtual and the real are becoming increasingly blurred.
Exactly, and that's one of the key messages of Snow Crash.
Mhm.
Stevenson is warning us that as we become more reliant on technology, we risk surrendering our autonomy to those who control the digital realm.
So while the metaverse might seem like a fun and exciting escape from the drudgery of reality,
Yeah.
it's also a potential trap, a gilded cage that could ultimately restrict our freedom and limit our potential.
Right, and that's a theme that resonates throughout the book. We see it in Hiro's struggle to balance his virtual life with his real-world responsibilities, in Whitey's fight for survival on the fringes of society, and in Rife's attempt to seize control of human consciousness itself.
Speaking of YT, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about her journey. She spends a lot of time on the raft, that massive collection of refugee ships. It's become a symbol of social inequality and the failure of traditional governments.
The Raft is a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour of the metaverse. It's a place where people are struggling to survive amidst poverty, violence, and disease.
It's like a floating slum, a stark reminder of the human cost of this hyper-capitalist future.
Exactly, and Whitey's experiences on the Raft highlight the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots.
She's constantly on the move, delivering packages, dodging danger, and trying to make a living in a world that seems to be crumbling around her.
Right, and her journey takes her to some pretty dark places, both literally and figuratively. She encounters pirates, gangs, and even a cult that's trying to weaponize the snow crash virus for their own twisted purposes.
YT's story is a reminder that even in a technologically advanced future, there will always be those who are left behind, those who are exploited and marginalized by the system.
And she's not just a passive victim, she's a fighter, a survivor. She uses her wits, her courage, and her loyalty to navigate this dangerous world and ultimately play a key role in stopping Rife's plan.
It's interesting how Stevenson uses YT's journey to explore the themes of social justice and economic inequality. It's like he's saying that even in a future where we can escape into virtual worlds, we can't ignore the real-world problems that are plaguing our society.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes Snow Crash such a powerful and thought-provoking book. It's not just a fun adventure story. It's a social commentary that challenges us to think critically about the world we're creating and the future we're heading towards.
It's also a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. There's always the possibility for resistance, and there's always the power of human connection to overcome even the most overwhelming obstacles.
Absolutely. And speaking of overcoming obstacles, things are about to get pretty intense for both Hiro and YT as they close in on Rife and his plan to unleash the snow crash virus.
Okay, so we've explored the metaverse, we've delved into the gritty realities of the raft, and we've seen how Hiro and YT's paths are converging towards a final showdown with Elbab Rife. But before we get to the epic climax, I want to touch on one more crucial element of the book, the ancient Sumerian mythology that underpins the entire story.
Ah, yes, the ancient myths about the goddess Ashera and the god Enki, which Stevenson so brilliantly weaves into the narrative.
Right, so far we've only talked about them in a kind of abstract way, but I'm curious to hear more about how these ancient myths actually connect to the snow crash virus and Rife's plan. How does Stevenson bridge that gap between ancient mythology and cyberpunk technology?
Well, he does it by suggesting that language itself has a kind of primal power, a power that can be used for both creation and destruction. And he draws a parallel between this ancient understanding of language and the way computer code works.
So you're saying that in Stevenson's world, language and code are essentially two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And the snow crash virus exploits this connection using a combination of linguistic and digital techniques to hijack the human brain and essentially reprogram people's thoughts and actions.
That's where the Sumerian myths come in, right? They provide a kind of framework for understanding the nature of language and its potential to be used as a weapon.
Precisely. Enki, the god of wisdom and water, represents the creative aspect of language, the power to build and innovate. Ashera, on the other hand, embodies the destructive side, the power to manipulate and control.
So Rife, with his plan to use the snow crash virus to control humanity, is essentially aligning himself with the destructive forces of Ashra.
Right. And Hiro, with his hacking skills and his understanding of ancient mythology, becomes the champion of Enki, the one who has to fight back against this threat to human autonomy and free will.
It's like this ancient battle between creation and destruction is being replayed in the digital age with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance.
And the final confrontation between Hiro and Rife becomes this epic showdown between these two opposing forces, with the metaverse and the raft as the battlegrounds.
This is getting me pumped. I can't wait to hear how it all goes down.
Well, then you'll definitely want to tune in for the final part of our deep dive into Snow Crash, where we'll break down the climax of the story and explore its implications for our own understanding of technology, language, and the future of human consciousness.
Okay, so we left off with Hiro and YT facing off against Rife. He's got the Snow Crash virus and a whole lot of ambition.
It's a battle on two fronts, you know? Heroes in the metaverse, trying to stop Rife from broadcasting the virus globally. YT's on the raft, dealing with the very real and immediate threat of Rife's forces who are trying to unleash the virus there.
So they're both up against pretty overwhelming odds. Rife has resources, technology, an army of fanatics at his disposal.
Yet what's striking is how Stephenson emphasizes the importance of individual action and ingenuity, even in this high-tech, hyper-connected world.
Yeah.
It comes down to Hiro and YT's skills, their courage, and their willingness to think outside the box.
Okay, so let's talk tactics.
Yeah.
How does Hiro plan to stop the broadcast in the metaverse? I mean, it's not like he can just unplug Rife's server.
Well, he does have his hacking skills.
Right.
But Stephenson, constantly subverts expectations. Hiro doesn't just rely on brute force hacking. He uses his knowledge of Sumerian mythology.
Right.
Understanding that the virus is built on ancient linguistic principles, he needs to find a way to disrupt the code at its core.
So it's a battle of wits as much as it is a battle of technology.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the deep structure of the virus, the way it exploits the connections between language and consciousness. Hiro realizes that to defeat the virus, he needs to fight it on its own terms, using his knowledge of ancient mythology to outsmart Rife.
That's fascinating. Like, he's using ancient wisdom to combat this futuristic threat. But what about YT? What's her strategy on the raft?
YT, being the street-smart and resourceful courier that she is, takes a more hands-on approach.
Okay.
She uses her knowledge of the raft's infrastructure, her network of contacts, and even her trusty skateboard to disrupt Rife's operation.
So she's basically waging a guerrilla war against Rife's forces, using her knowledge of the terrain and her agility to her advantage.
And exactly. She's a force of chaos, disrupting Rife's carefully laid plans and buying Hiro precious time to work his magic in the metaverse.
This is where the book really shines.
Yeah.
It's not just this battle of good versus evil. It's a testament to human resilience, adaptability, and that power of individual action, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds.
And let's not forget, the role of collaboration. Hiro and YT might be fighting on separate fronts, but they're still working together, relying on each other's strengths to achieve a common goal.
And they have allies, right?
Yeah.
With Librarian, the AI program that helps Hiro navigate the vast knowledge base of the metaverse.
Right. The Librarian represents the potential for technology to be a force for good, to empower individuals and foster knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
And then there's Juanita, Hiro's ex-girlfriend, who's a skilled hacker and programmer in her own right.
So it's not just a solo mission. It's this collective effort with Hiro and YT at the center of this network of allies in contributing their unique skills to the fight.
And that, I think, is one of the key takeaways from Snow Crash, in a world that can feel increasingly fragmented and individualistic. Stevenson reminds us that we're stronger together, that collaboration and community are essential for overcoming the challenges we face.
So how does it all end? Do Hiro and YT succeed in stopping Rife and saving the world from the Snow Crash virus?
Well, I don't want to spoil the ending for those who haven't read the book, but let's just say that Stevenson delivers a resolution that's both satisfying and thought-provoking.
Okay.
He leaves us with a sense of hope, but also a lingering awareness of the fragility of our digital world,
Right.
and the importance of safeguarding our autonomy and freedom in the face of technological advancement.
So it sounds like Snow Crash is more than just a thrilling cyberpunk adventure. It's a cautionary tale about the power of information, the allure and the dangers of virtual worlds, and the enduring importance of human connection and collaboration.
Exactly. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it, prompting you to question your own relationship with technology and the future we're building together.
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Snow Crash. It's been a wild ride full of twists and turns, ancient myths and futuristic technologies, sword fights, and skateboard chases.
It's a book that has something to offer everyone you know, whether you're a diehard cyberpunk fan or just curious about the impact of technology on our lives.
So to our listener who sent in this request,
Yeah.
thank you for the suggestion. And to all of our listeners, keep those deep dive requests coming. We'll see you next time on Books and Bytes.
See you later.
Until then, happy reading.